Showtime. Welcome to the show. I'm excited tonight, folks. 2012, Paul Von Ward is here. How great is that? He's returning tonight. Just let me read this. Tonight, 2012, some say we are headed full speed towards the apocalypse. Certainly, the world is enduring what seems like never-ending conflict amongst its nations. Some say the world is headed to catastrophe as the planet will no longer be able to sustain life due to global warming. There seems to be an unprecedented amount of extreme weather that is leaving no part of our globe unscathed. Some say 2012 is a global consciousness awakening where mankind will evolve to a higher level. Yet there remains amongst us today those who claim spiritual supremacy and then stone women to death. Tonight on Night Fright, we look at 2012 through a different lens. With our guest tonight, Paul Von Ward, we will look at his paper called 12 Myths of 2012. You know, folks, as December 21st, 2012 looms ever closer, and the solstice with it, it's going to benefit us all to stop and ponder and listen. And that's what we're going to do tonight. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for harmony and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, welcome, one and all. Welcome to Night Fright. Tonight, folks, 2012. Our guest, Paul Von Ward, is returning. And, folks, just a little note, settle in. This is your time, as always. Relax. We're going to take you on a wonderful journey for the next hour or so. Put your feet up, get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a beverage of your choice going. Just sit back and relax and listen to what Paul has to say. He's a profound thinker. Just let me read a little bit. An interdisciplinary cosmologist and independent scholar, Paul is internationally known for the hypothesis of AB, advanced beings, and fans of this show will know that we discussed that last time. It's there in the archives, www.nightfrightshow.com. Intervention in human development. His theory of natural spirituality in an evolving, self-learning universe, and research on the survival of a personal soul genome. Yeah, that's right. His current books on these topics are We've Never Been Alone, which I have right here, folks, and The Solarian Legacy and The Soul Genome. Paul's academic background, Florida State, only Harvard, folks, just Harvard, just to throw it a name, and other institutions. His military, diplomatic, international, executive career and research on 5 continents keeps his provocative publications grounded in emerging science and credible human experiences. I want to welcome Paul back to the show. It's great to see you. You are such a great guy and a profound thinker. I've been reading your paper, and it has sparked so many influential theories in my head, and of course it has instituted many questions. But first, I know you were a diplomat in France for several years. I want to touch on the subject of the American diplomat that was just murdered in Libya. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, obviously, I was very saddened to hear about He and I were not colleagues. I'm much older and have been out of the diplomatic service for a long time. But having one of my ambassadors when I was a young Foreign Service officer back in the 1970s, my ambassador from the Dominican Republic, where I was serving as an administrative counselor with him before he moved to Lebanon, and he was assassinated by terrorists in 1976. And so this just brought back all of that. And what it did for me, given all the years of my research and writing that you've just talked about since I was serving overseas in Paris and Africa and the Caribbean and elsewhere, I have looked more deeply into what I call worldviews. Worldviews are assumptions that people carry around in their heads that are based on nothing but human assumptions. And that is the situation with religions. Religions are based on ethereal ideas that nobody can prove one way or the other. And yet, these unprovable assumptions about the origins and the fundamentals of our religions are human concoctions along the way. And we have then these really, what I would call fanciful thoughts that motivate people, and this is not just the Muslim world. I mean, it goes back to Christianity, it goes back to Zoroastrianism and Judaism and so on. It's been there for the last 2,000 years. So what is so painful about this is that people are killing people and have been killing people for 2 millennia based on beliefs in their own ideas of what they can't prove. Humans need a level of faith that they know the truth about the most essential questions, you know. What am I? Where am I from? What am I going to go to from here? Those existential questions. So that's the thing that is troubling to me.
Paula, I want to interject a question here. Why do we, you know, Dr. King mentioned we always set up this dichotomy, this division. We set up an us-them scenario. Why is it so important for us to be us? And why do we always have to define ourselves by negating what other people can bring in to a scenario?
I think there's a historical scenario that developed over literally thousands of years. It seems to me, if I look at this universe of ours and the consciousness of the beings that we are, and likely beings elsewhere as well, we do need to identify ourselves. We do need to have a sense of the integrity of a being. I mean, that would make sense, that, you know, consciousness and the cells and all of the organs of our bodies and so on, they have to be held together by a sense of an integral entity, being. Okay, so let's assume that that's a natural need in all humans. So we have some options, though, of making choices about how to identify ourselves. Do we identify ourselves by focusing on our own capabilities, our own creative potential in concert with all other humans? Or do we define ourselves in contrast to others? And I think that along the way, we got into a situation where cultures, as they began to divide, as they began to separate, and of course, we talked about this in the We've Never Been Alone book. Unfortunately, I think we had models from other more advanced civilizations, whether it was advanced civilizations from planet Earth or elsewhere, I don't know. But it is clear from all of the religious texts that humans were perceiving, whether real or other origins of these beings, they had the notion that we had to attach ourselves to be the followers of one of these beings or another. So we had Baal and we had Yahweh and so on throughout all of the gods in India and every place else in the Middle East that we have in our history text. So what happened is that then humans gradually over centuries gave themselves a sense of identity, of purpose, of a sense of beingness that was different. And if people challenged our differences, we became angry. And I realize that sounds very simplistic, but I think we have this kind of psychological mechanism then that's been operating at least for 2,000 or more years.
Is that because, Paul, we become angry because we feel that those attacks are directly against self, our own belief system, our own consciousness, if you will?
Well, I think that, yes, we feel like, if I say to you, oh, I don't like that hairstyle, it really doesn't work, well, that we can all have that kind of negative attitudes about somebody else's choices. But I don't think that is the most powerful motivating psychological force. I think is that all of us as humans, we know at a subconscious level that we are using as answers for those existential questions. We're making assumptions that we know we cannot prove. And we are psychologically afraid of admitting that we don't know. If we admit that we don't know the truth about the universe as we concoct it in our religions and our cultural belief systems, then we are undermining our sense of self-security. And that sounds a little bit convoluted, I think, if you don't think about it a little bit. But I know that when I was a kid and had an inferiority complex, and I reacted against other people who were different from me because I was defending what I knew of myself, which was that I didn't have what I was trying to project to the world. And when we are aware of that at a subconscious level, we really fear any challenges to our unproven assumptions of who we are.
Paul Von Ward tonight, folks. Incredible stuff. Settle in, relax, because you're going to learn a lot from this fellow. He's a profound, profound thinker. Everything he writes and contemplates is thought out well, and he explains it so well. Are you a professor, Paul, by the way?
I have never had a professorial job, but I have been a teacher all my life. My first gig, as it were, was a minister in a small church in Florida when I was in graduate school, studying clinical psychology, but preaching a fundamentalist kind of Christianity. And I was trying to convey and help people understand that. And so from the ministry to the Navy to the Foreign Service to international nonprofit organization, where I'm teaching cross-cultural understanding and how we achieve peace in the world. So yes, but I might have done better had I had professorial jobs that had a salary attached to them, but no, this is my personality. I love to most of all to think and to contemplate and to research and to synthesize and put the big picture together. As you know, my website is the bigger picture, and that's what I'm trying to do. But the second most interesting thing for me is then to talk about it and try to explicate these ideas and concepts to others. So I guess that's what a professor does.
Well, you convey all your ideas succinctly and precisely and in clarity that I think is very envious from a person who spent a lot of time in universities with various professors. I was talking about this the other night with my honey on how bad all the professors I've ever had have been. They seem to be self-absorbed, and whereas they always felt that the messenger was more important than the message, I feel, and that with you, the message is more important than the messenger, and I think full kudos to you. Folks, Paul Von Ward, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a place where you can order the book online. Also, Paul has a website full of amazing, incredible stuff. There are papers there for you to download. This is a profound thinker, folks. Somebody that thinks doesn't even relate to a box. I was going to say outside the box. There is no box with Paul. You are going to come away. It's true. He breaks down a lot of barriers, and he puts it in very clear, precise ideas that I think all of us can benefit from and ponder. Paul, let's go back to 2012 now. I want to start off and read the very first thing. This is the 12 Myths of 2012. This is a series of ideas that Paul has put down on paper, and you can download them off his website, and I'll put that link to the website, www.nightfrightshow.com. The first one, 2012 will change Earth forever. Publishing and media industries made a fortune purveying baseless prophecies about the hazards of 2012. Believers will be distracted until December 31st. Whatever the impact is on our planet from a galactic line crossing, it has gradually affected us for centuries as it approached and continues as it moves on. Let's talk about that, Paul. You started off with this one. Why? Because do you feel that the media and people that are releasing books and videos, etc., one person says catastrophe, Hollywood says catastrophe, another person says spiritual consciousness. Are they all just trying to cash in on a gimmick?
Well, I don't want to use the word gimmick, but I think what happens, this happened when you remember Y2K a few years ago. Certain external realities exist in our society and the universe and so on, and we actually, as we mentioned earlier, we don't know the answers to so many different questions. We have no idea about the forces that are at work in the creation of our physical and internal realities. So what we do is we look for these touchstones. We look for an anchor somewhere to build some ideas about. And so I think that's what happened with this 2012 situation. I'd like to just take a few minutes to put that in context. Now, let's think about this. There are two different things that we're talking about. One is time, another is cycles. Now, time, I want to define it arbitrarily as the human perspective of these cycles. So we humans, we create time, and we say, there are 60 minutes in an hour. There are 12 hours in a half a day and 24 hours in the full day. So we've artificially cut the flow of events, the flow of time, if you want to use that word, into little bits and pieces. Okay, and I have to say that some of these bits and pieces are related to natural cycles. I mean, when we say it's a 24-hour day, well, that makes sense. We could call it a 13-hour day if we had used that measurement rather than a 24-hour day. But that is a natural rhythm. The daily, the diurnal, the solar, the galactic, these cycles are external to us, and things are happening in that set of cycles. Now, we then have arbitrarily looked at the cycles of nature around us, and then we've put some labels on them. One of them is the precession of these sets of stars, the constellations that are the backdrop of our human vision, looking at the galaxy around us. And so we've said about 26,000 of our years. Now, the year been figured differently. We have in the Bible, this person, Methuselah, lived 900 years or whatever the dates are. And those years could very well have been 5 of our own 1 year. So what I'm trying to get across is the point that these are artificial divisions of space and time. Now, in this particular case of the long calendar, the long count of the Mayans, has to do, if you put about 5 of these long count calendars of 5,100 plus years, you get around 26,000 years. And that happens to be, when this cycle gets around. And so we say, oh, okay, we have figured out a particular time frame that has to do with human behavior, the consciousness, civilizations, and so on. That, to me, is our own projection. What is happening is that at this point in time, in December 21, 2012, we do cross this galactic line, and we are moving from one side to the other at that point in our artificial time. So in that instance, you've got our artificial time and a particular event, phenomenon in our universe. They coincide. Now, but what does that mean? We have absolutely no idea, because 5,125 years ago, we were humans, we were in what we call prehistory, which was before writing, but we had the hieroglyphs, we had the Sumerian tablets, and we did have some written history, but we really don't, we have no good understanding of what happened 5,126 years ago to make any projection, as what will happen at the end of this particular cycle.
And primarily, history, folks, was passed down through oral traditions. First Nations here in Canada pass it down like that. And sometimes those oral traditions will become songs, they'll become legend, myths, for example. Sometimes there's a little bit of truth, sometimes they're expanded a little bit. I'm going to go back to Paul now. Sorry to interrupt you, Paul.
Oh, no, but that's good, though, because we don't know, what to project on this event in time in this year that we call 2012. And the calendar 2012 started back with the Romans when they decided to set up a new way of measuring time, and they didn't do that until about the 5th century to say, well, 500 years ago that was the time of Jesus. And so these are official constructs that we try to corral the universe into our own narrow measurements. So anyhow, what I'm suggesting is that we don't have any historical basis of similar events in terms of physical events, in terms of social, cultural events, conscious events, in terms of human history. So how can we predict what is going to happen this time? And I would like to just suggest that we've made a real exaggeration of the importance of this particular moment, because, and some people would think about the butterfly effect. Well, there are 2 sides to the butterfly effect. And I just say what that is for anyone who hasn't heard it, but most of us have. The butterfly is that, flaps his wings in the Australian desert, and it later on results in hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, and big things. Well, and that's a valid concept, because a small event can, as it expands its influence throughout the larger system, it has a large effect. Now, I would suggest, though, that at the galactic level, you have the opposite, meaning that if the galactic level and our passage across that line is the opposite, it's a big thing at that scale, but on our little Earth here, the immediate effect is minuscule, hardly any at all. And so what is going to happen in terms of 2012 and its effect is a function of human beliefs and behaviors.
Paul, I want to ask you also, I want to come back to this as well, but we were on the subject, you were on the subject of time. And why did we invent time? It seems to me it has to come down to that definition again that we always try to do with things, busting them down into smaller components, because we know time probably doesn't exist on different planes. It certainly, we're led to believe, doesn't exist in the afterlife. Why would we invent time? Is that just another way of defining who we are, an us and them scenario again?
I think so. You see, time is, our word and our concept. I do believe, and this is where I differ from some other cosmologists and so on, who say that all time is instantaneous, it's in the moment, etc. I don't think that is the case. I think our perceptions of things are, of course, based on the moment that we're in at this point in time. But if we look at the universe, if we look at our own lives, if we look at nature, there is a sequential era development of growth, decay, rebirth, etc. So to me, that is the natural universe in its own evolutionary trajectory. But what we do as humans is we look at that trajectory from the Big Bang or the creation, whatever point you want to use, the grand rebirth, I call it, from probably a previous universe, as the Hindus have thought for tens of thousands of years. What we've done is we have decided that we need to somehow track this trajectory. And so we've developed, years and so on based on natural cycles. If we were on Mars, we would, of course, have a different length of the month. All of these things. So we need to keep that in mind and understand that what's so important to us, that one solstice moment on December the 21st on planet Earth, it's ours to create from. And
what do you think humanity is going to create? And it, after speaking with you, it kind of scares me a little bit because there's a lot of whack jobs out there. I had alluded to that in the opening, where, folks, the day that the Mars Curiosity landed successfully on Mars, that same day, the very same day, over in Afghanistan, the Taliban had beheaded 12 people. Why? Because they were dancing. So we have this crazy dichotomy happening in all of humanity. So it scares me, Paul, to think what humanity is going to create.
No, I think that's right. See, what you have just so well illustrated, much better than I was able to illustrate it, the contrast between something happening constructively in some other place of the universe, of our solar system, and you see this seemingly totally disconnected from reality set of behaviors on the part of various cultural and religious groups. And this is the blessing and the burden of humanity. I mean, we have the ability to create new ideas, new beliefs and concepts. The problem is, though, when we cannot validate those beliefs, what do? We then kill people, and we do inquisitions, and we do conversions under the threat of the sword, as the Spaniards did as they entered this hemisphere over 500 years ago, and so on. So I'm afraid that we are getting more deeply split than any time in history in terms of these worldviews.
That's right.
And we don't, and it's happening politically, it's happening, in terms of the religious sphere, it's in social, cultural, educational, and that's why I talk about so much the bigger picture. We have somehow got to take all of these stories that different cultures have and bring them together to show how they can all fit together, and that they are amenable to our what is the word I'm looking? Refinement of them.
That's right.
The bringing out of that which is good and leaving behind that which has not worked. And so we call that, our different paradigms. And I'm going to be at a conference next month in Minneapolis where we're going to it's a paradigm symposium where we're going to talk about this notion of what is our vision of reality, that we are better said, that the paradigm is the lens through which we see reality. And we've got to all get on the same page at a much larger scale than we're at this particular point in time.
Because obviously never before has humanity really had the ability to destroy itself en masse in seconds. And it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying when you think of that. I'm looking at your book here, Paul, and I'm thinking, my God, the wonderful ideas in here from a fellow human being. This is the potential we all have. And then when I think of something like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we always revert back to this violence, and Paul is making very precise sense of this, where we battle each other, folks, not only on an internal basis, but unfortunately on an external basis as well. Paul Von Ward, folks, settle in. You're just joining us. Lots of time left. We've just passed the halfway mark. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a juice going, a beverage of your choice. Put the feet up and relax. Profound thinker, Paul. I love when Paul comes on the show because I can't believe a half hour's gone by already, Paul. I am just drawn to your thought process, and again, I want to give you kudos, because the way you explain things in such precise, concise, and clear sequencing, it's just a gift, I think, from God, if you will. I want to ask you about that. You're an ex-minister. I suspect your belief system has changed over the years, but where do they coincide?
Well, you see, I have found myself in the middle as a diplomat, and many years, of course. But I think the middle is somewhat more likely to be valid than the edges. And so I grew up in, the creationist worldview and so on, which, of course, has been very much discredited just in terms of our own use of our own experiences and logic and what we learn about the evidence of our history and how we're developing as beings and so on. But on the other hand, we have this group that not a friend of mine, but a person that I read a lot of his stuff is Michael Shermer of the Skeptics magazine and online thing. I use him really as sort of just a symbol of that particular mentality, which is that, there's nothing that you can't feel and touch and manipulate it in your hand. If you can't do that, then it doesn't exist. And what we know from physics today and consciousness studies and our neuroscience research that we're doing with the interaction of the mind and the brain, because there seems to be two ends of that spectrum. You know, the mind and the brain are not exactly the same. There's the overlap. And we don't know which one affects which one the most, and it's likely to be a synergistic kind of process. But anyhow.
But I agree with you, Paul, because, you know, I compose music for NASA and all those guys, and that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say here is the music's already in my head. I don't have to write it out or play it or anything else for it to exist. It already exists. It's just like your ideas already exist before you put them to type.
Yeah, those I don't claim any of them. I mean, I'm only the scribe, if you want to look at it that way, and I think that's what happens to us as individuals, because we are a conscious collective, and you know, you've heard of word the Teilhard de Chardin notion of a noosphere, which is all of our consciousness evolve together and just circle the earth and so on. The collective unconscious of Jung and Freud, and that concept. So these ideas are out there, and I think that is what we need to be focusing on right now. My research, a good part of my time right now is trying to sort of tease out the insights we get from neuroscience when we see how our own beliefs and our own thought patterns activate different parts of our brain, and also in the reciprocal of that, how the brain, stimulated by external ingestions of chemicals and other things that give us agonist and antagonist of our neural systems, to produce different emotions and sets of ideas and behaviors and patterns and memories. All of these things are sort of playing off each other, I guess, is one way to think about it. What we've learned recently about junk DNA. I mean, you know, remember 10 years ago when they said, oh, this is 95% junk DNA and it's not doing anything? Well, now, of course, we know that it does a lot of things. And one of the things that it does is that it is the mediator of our environment, our beliefs, our emotions, that then activate the processes of the DNA to produce certain things, certain effects in our bodies. That's and right. So this is where we are.
Can I just interject something here too, folks? I had the wonderful opportunity, just like I have tonight, to speak with a profound thinker, to speak with a fellow by the name of Dr. Francis Collins. He broke the genome. Well, actually, he led the team to break the genome. And I asked him, I said, how much of our DNA is different from another person? He said 99.9% is the same. So, and here we are shooting each other because, I don't know, some guy may have a black face or a red face or a half green face. We'll find a reason. I'm sorry, Paul, just to interrupt you, but I just wanted to www.Brent Holland Show, not Night Fright Show. You'll find that interview there. I'm sorry, Paul.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that this is where we need to be thinking now. It's between the materialist scientific perspective and the spiritualist, supernatural, fanciful sector, because both of them are dealing with assumptions, and we need to get the cooperation among these different groups to validate or invalidate these beliefs from science as well as from religion and so on. So when you talk about where do I stand, that's where I stand. I mean, I think we have to test one against the other, and we have to evaluate over time these belief systems, and we can project from these beliefs, and we may hit that it's a valid answer, just as those guys working with the junk DNA found out. Well, this is something. It's a good thing that some people refuse to just dismiss it. And so in my work, I don't dismiss any worldview assumptions out of hand. I mean, and if we would give socially and culturally and politically this same sort of, let's test that out, I'll check yours out and you check mine out, and then let's talk together about, what we can have in common in terms of an understanding. It's so frustrating to me. It sounds so simple when I say it that way, but it just is impossible for humans and their emotionality to carry on that sort of a process.
Again, folks, I had the wonderful opportunity, Paul, to speak with Ted Sorensen, the fellow who wrote the letter to Khrushchev to get him to back down during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if I learned anything from him, it was dialogue before bullets. Yeah. You put yourself in the other person's shoes, and then speak.
And I had a wonderful experience of that. It was sort of frustrating when I was in it, but I was at an academic conference in the summer, a month or so ago, and we had presentations of these juxtaposing worldviews. And you would think that people who are professors and researchers and academic scholars and so on, who have had so much formal education, who might be able to engage in this dialogue process better than others. But I discovered that when you are talking about differences in these existential worldviews that we're talking about, our belief systems about who we are, what we are, where we came from, what we're doing here, and all those kind of things, the reaction is just as volatile, just as unthinking, just as blindly expressing this hostility and threat against people who have a different set of ideas. So it's not a question of these guys in the streets of Benghazi, where our ambassador was killed. It is in back departments. It's among the theologians. It's at every level of our society. And so at some point we have really got to talk to ourselves about why we can't listen to and talk to people who are different than we are.
Are we going to make it as a species, Paul?
I just wrote something a couple of days ago. I don't know what I did with it now, but that we are on a track right now that if there is not a significant change, then we're on a track of self-destruction.
Suicidal.
And in terms of our physical habitat, the ecosystems, our social and cultural and political systems, and what their impact has on all of the life forms, and I mean all of the life forms of the oceans and the skies and the mud and the foods, and I mean, we're now learning so much that we have more bacteria in our system than we have cells in our system. I mean, it's 100 times as many. I mean, we literally have 3 pounds of bacteria that help us maintain our stability as an organism. And yet we are killing, species after species with chemicals and drugs and so on. We have got to learn that we are not separate from the rest of the system.
That's right, precisely. And I think that's why I like the space program so much, for so many reasons, because it gets us out of ourselves. You're able to look at the Earth from outside of the Earth and say, my God, are we ever being stupid? There's a whole universe out here. And yet we consistently find ways to prevent ourselves from evolving, if you will. And I don't mean just a spiritual evolving or physical evolving. I mean, just like Paul said, just to get from A to B and survive till tomorrow. Never before has the world had the ability to feed everybody. The delivery systems are in place with the military, and yet we just don't take advantage of it. And there's kids dying right now in Africa as I speak. Paul Von Ward is our guest tonight, folks. I should have said this more, Paul. I apologize. www.nightfrightshow.com. Please click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order it from the comfort of your home. Also, I'm going to put Paul's link there for his website. There's a wealth of information there. And, we started off reading. We've read one so far, folks, about the 2012 myths. I'm going to cut to another one that I think is just as pertinent. And this it's kind of along the same lines that we've been thinking. God will always protect our planet. Let's talk about that one.
Well, see, this goes back to what we were talking about in terms of worldviews. Right. Our concept of this sort of humanoid idea of God that we have inherited from the early Christians of the Yahweh model, which is a authoritarian humanoid figure. If we believe that being is somehow watching everything that happens on this planet and is making sure that it's going to be preserved in a particular way, we trust that being, and because we believe it's either going to be taken care of forever by this God, or it's going to be taken care of by this God until we have been so bad that the Armageddon is going to happen and the earth will be consumed in flames. Either way, whether you think it's going to happen, end up negatively or carry on in a beautifully constructed fashion forever, you absolve yourself of any responsibility for the health of the planet. And I think that we have that mentality in a majority of the people on the planet. They say, we humans can do what we want to do because God is taking care of us in this physical life. And that is a very strong assumption in a lot of these belief systems that we've been talking about. And so what I'm trying to suggest in this particular myth, because I think it is a myth, because I think the universe is such that is a self-learning, self-organizing, self-evolving, and we as a conscious species are responsible for our own self-evolution.
Very much so.
And I think all the evidence, all the systems that we have studied on this planet suggest that. And physics suggests that this happens also at the level of galaxies with the black hole birth and rebirth and so on. So all of these natural laws seem to suggest that is the case. So if that is the case, we can bring about our own destruction on this planet because we can interfere with its self-balancing systems at a level when we are 7 to 9 billion people on the planet. We have the power then to destroy one or the other of those systems. And then the whole chain reaction occurs. And that can happen.
Very much so, very quickly, too. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on Paul Von Ward's book cover associated with tonight's guest. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. Paul, let's continue with some more of these. Military dominance guarantees peace. Again, that seems at odds with itself right away.
But this is part of our United States political campaign, which happens every 4 years. And unfortunately, we still have in our culture the notion that we have to have the biggest military on the planet. In other words, we have a military establishment that is larger and spends more money than all other militaries on the planet. Now, what nation on the planet today has the most opposition on the planet? Which country on the planet today gets the most attacks, gets the most, has the most? So what we are blinding ourselves to this myth, and that's why I call it a myth. It's been a myth not just in 2012, but I think we ought to focus on it this year, because this is a time to take stock. And we have such a difficult situation in our fiscal and monetary policies in our government budget, you know, that we can no longer, I mean, we should not have done that for the last 50 years anyway, but, you know, it's now time to really give a hard assessment of this myth. We are causing ourselves, and in a way what we're doing is, with this military approach to our position in the planet, what we're doing is hollowing out the rest of our economy, our society. We are taking resources out, and we're having a very fragile shell that can easily be crushed, because we've taken all the meat out of the gourd, as it were.
Paul, you know, when you obviously, because you've been in the diplomatic corps, you probably have friends that are either ex-diplomatic or still in the corps. What do they say when you speak to them, your friends, when you talk about these concepts? Are they, by and large, in agreement with you? Do they give you a lot of opposition?
I think that most people who are professional diplomats, and I mean professional in the sense of having studied the history of nations, who have studied international relations and the history of wars and the rise and fall of nations. Anyone who has taken the time to look at those areas of knowledge that we all have access to, I think that they understand that our best foot is not being put forward, and that we are putting a heavy boot down on the rest of the world in a fashion that we are increasing the animosities and the lack of support that we had some time ago, and that we are at the same time weakening ourselves internally. And I have to say, I have military friends who also have that view. I mean, we have some very intelligent, very bright people in our military, well-educated, and they understand the problem. But what we have is this set of institutions, you know, which has to feed itself. And we're getting it with, you know, causing conflict in order to use our force on that conflict, having to feed the corporations that manufacture our technologies. So it's now a system that is self-aggrandizing, I guess is a proper term, through lobbying, the budgets that we produce out of our Congress and executive branch. So we're all caught up in this this notion of American exceptionalism, that we are the only country on the world that should be playing this role. We will always have that role. We've got to feed it. We've got to make sure that we don't stop anything that we're doing. This is one of the biggest myths that we have about ourselves that it really concerns me. And
Paul, I was going to say, we've got to start wrapping up, but I can't get over the time. I'm looking up, and what is it Einstein said about time? And we talked about time before too. It's relevant. If you're having a good time, it goes by like that, and it really has.
My convoluted sentences, go round and around in circles, such that we don't go down the list. We sort of
go all around in circles. Paul Von Ward's been our guest tonight, folks. We've been talking about some of the myths surrounding 2012, but we've gone in very, very distant places as well. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on tonight's guest book cover. That'll take you right to a spot online where you can order the book. And also, I'm going to put his link for his website there where you can examine his list of 12 myths surrounding 2012 to a fuller extent. You can download it as a PDF file, as I have. And Paul, where are you going to be December 22nd, 2012?
Well, I'm probably going to be at home with the fireplace going and having a bit of a pre-Christmas eggnog. And no, I will be like everybody else. I will be following the media to find out what crazy people are doing around the planet and so on. And I will encourage friends who want to create a more positive future to do it for themselves.
Very well put. And folks, people ask me that question all the time. Where are you going to be December 21st, 22nd, 2012? And I always give the same answer. Christmas shopping, last minute Christmas shopping, like every other male I know. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.